What's going on, fellow RC addicts, enthusiasts, and just anybody with a general interest in the RC hobby? Bear down here with you. If you guys happen to catch my video of me at the motocross track with my buddy while he was riding his dirt bike, you know I broke one of my steering blocks. I ended up replacing that with the RPM oversized bearing carrier. I only did the fronts for now. I was going to do the rears, but I happen to have 2 packs of the bearing or Traxxas bearings still, and since that's like $20, I figured unless I break one of these, I'm going to go through those bearings first and then switch the backs to the big bearing kit. But as you can see on the front here, I have the RPM A-arms, and then I also have the RPM threaded hinge pins. So I'm going to go ahead and I have the RPM arms all the way around. I was actually just waiting for me to break them or a good excuse to put them on. So I'm just going to have the stock Traxxas as backup in case the RPM breaks. But we're going to go ahead and put the RPM arms on, and then we're also going to put the RPM hinge pins. So right here is an example of why people are using the threaded hinge pins. Now with the RPM plastic, it is, I don't want to say softer, but it's more pliable. So when it does get heated up, it does tend to have a little bit more give in it. So I would imagine that RPM without the hinge pins is going to end up having more flex in that. I mean, this shouldn't be sitting like this. I should be sitting like that. It's tighter like this one, or even on this side it's a little bit tighter, but it still came loose. I mean, it should be sitting about like at least like that. You can see the bottoms not nearly as gapped, but that's exactly why people are putting the RPM threaded hinge pins on there. So it looks like the only thing I'm gonna have to remove on the back here is the wheelie brace, just to get to the back pin carrier. So we're just gonna go ahead and take those 2 boys out. Another helpful hint is it's not as difficult when you're doing the rear because you don't have the multiple different hubs and everything. But if you just do one side at a time, and that way you have the opposite side to kind of look at to see what you did, just makes life a lot easier. So go ahead and remove the 1 pin retainer. Before we get too far, I should probably remove the pin on the shock. So a lot of times you'll get dirt dug into the different screws holding this stuff on. So I just like having a little pick like this. Helps you from keep you from rounding out those screws that you can't get your driver all the way into because it's filled with dirt or different debris, what have you. So once you get the one side done, it's pretty easy. Just make sure we keep the screws together. Want to get that pin out, go ahead and just take a thin driver, push it out, pull this out, and now we no longer have to worry about the shock being in the way. Now this one I do find to be the hardest when you're taking this top one out because you can't really get a driver in there to push it through the other side. Make sure you're not trashing your thread. Let me find a better. Holy cow, I hope this pin's not bent. She's definitely not wanting to come out right away. Holy shnikes. Not bent. Might be something we might want to throw a little bit of grease on. So now, look at that. Hub's all easy to get out now. So I don't know if you can see that, but there is a little space right there they put to so you can actually put your drivers in there without having to remove stuff, which is pretty well thought out, I think, by Traxxas. Pull this pin out. Bada bing, bada boom. Now we just got to make sure that we're taking the pin retaining screw out because we're going to be reusing that. Just got to make sure we're saving all those. We got another one up here. It's probably one of those times where I should be using the power driver, but whatever. I'm going to be reusing the stock rear hub carrier. Obviously I'd like to get the RPM ones, but like I said, I had already bought several packages. All right, so normally if we'd be changing the hub or the bearing or anything like that, we'd be taking this apart, taking the axle out and redoing all this, but since we are not doing that, we don't have to worry about doing any of this. So stock Traxxas arms going in the spare bin. Now, since we're using the threaded pins, we are going to have to do some modification to the Traxxas A arms. I'll go ahead and show you what we're going to be doing there. Go ahead and pull the pins out for you. They do come with directions. They're kind of vague. So the hinge pin retaining screw is going to be this guy right here. So we're going to be drilling this out all the way. If you don't have a 4mm, 5/32 standard is perfect. Ideally, having something long enough to go all the way through. But if you don't have it long enough, I don't know if you see it up here, we've got a little area to push the pin back through. Acts as a perfect little center. Pin retainer screw, opposite. Make sure we're going nice and straight. Get it in the center of that hole. Go ahead and get that burr off. If you got a deburring tool, a knife, or whatever, go ahead and do the opposite on this one. Hinge retaining screw, opposite shoulder. Go ahead. Make sure we're nice and straight. And that is literally the only modification you need to make to get the PM threaded hinge pins to go through there. So when we start putting this back together, since you're going to be putting one of the hinge retaining screws on the inside and then the cap on the outside, I like to go ahead put that screw in right there before we go in there. Otherwise it's going to be impossible for us to try to get in here, put things together. Start with the lower one. Same thing with the lower one. It is a little easier to get to the lower screws, but go ahead and put the front screw in first. Remember, we're making our own threads here, so we don't want to make sure we're not stripping it out and messing it up. Let's slide this into place. Sometimes a little finagling is in order. This other hinge retaining screw in. That hinge pin in. I'm gonna go ahead and do the second one now. This one is much easier. So you're like, right now you can go ahead and look, and there's two different settings right here. 1, 2. I mean, obviously you can tell just by the wear marks, but if you weren't sure, you could just look at the other side to see where your settings were sitting at. And good part's about just doing one at a time. Alright, so this is one of the ones that had the cap on it. Just make sure you put this back in the cup. Go ahead and start with the bottom one. Threaded screw. You are going to need a 3mm driver on this. Push that through, get the 3mm out. And if you guys just have one of these cheap little tools that come with any of them, it's a small side, 5.5mm. Go ahead and put that on one side. Get this started. I'm not going to tighten it down all the way. Same thing. Push and pin through. 5.5mm. Alright, go ahead and get this shock mounted up. Put the screw back in. Hinge pin retaining screws. Now we got some extra hinges. Tighten this down a little bit. Sure, still got movement. And that is one corner done. The Traxxas threaded hinges. We're going to start off the other side with drilling out the holes again. So, got the retaining hole, opposite side. Drilling that out. Nice and flat. Using the hole as a center guide. shoulder, retaining screw, opposite shoulder we're drilling, nice and flat. Got a little bit easier for me. Bada bing, bada boom. Go ahead and take the shock off. Bada bing, bada boom. Through here, try to push that pin out. Remember, none of these are broken. I do not throw these parts away. When I'm out bashing, I like to try to keep as many spare parts as possible. I bring a big Rubbermaid tote with each specific car I'm bringing out with different little parts and things I think I might break. It's always nice to have the extras. Slide this right into place. Take one of the drivers. Try to line it up as good as possible. Seems pretty good. Alright, let's go ahead and get down here with you guys and see if we can't get that lined up for you. Sorry for taking you guys out of shot there for a sec. When you're doing a hand driver, you don't want to tighten it up all the way, and I have my clutch set at 2, so I'm not too worried about stripping the screws out. Just got to make sure we remember to go back and do all that. Same with this guy. Putting the screw in there. Put the little pin retainer clip on there. Tighten that bad boy up. If I forget, go ahead and tighten this guy up. Put the dog bone in. Maybe. There we go. 5.5 millimeter locking nut. 3 millimeter driver. Tighten this guy down a little bit. Remember, we don't want to be super tight yet. Top pin run through. Again, maybe. 5.5. 3 millimeter driver. And this guy up. Get some play. Good play. Alright. Alright, put this guy back in. Click this guy on. Reconnect the wheelie bar. Down good. And there we go. We have our X-Maxx with RPM arms all the way around. We've got the large hub carriers on the front. We'll be replacing the rears after I'm done using up those bearings. And then we have the threaded RPM hinge pins all the way around. So if you guys are curious as to what everyone's talking about with the threaded hinge pins or why anybody would even want them, well, there you go. I hope this video was helpful. As always, if you guys liked it, give it a thumbs up. If you haven't already, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. And if you don't do either, at least go out and have some fun with some RC folks. Bear down out.